Monitoring que ça fait? Oh, mais c'est comme ça. Comme sous bail, Carl a réunion sur ça, non? Demain pour lui là. Non, il devait là, non, il devait là, non, il devait là, non, ça. Ouais. Vous pensez, c'est une première réunion, par contre, qui se fait causer là-bas. On va regarder sur ça. Nous- Non, 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 non.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, according to where you are in the world, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to our meeting. We will now go to point for discussion 3. Let's continue the discussion, and I would like to invite Mr. Akiyama to introduce the 3rd point for discussion. Mr. Akiyama, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning to all. Good afternoon, good evening. So today's discussion point number 3, is as what recommendations can be made for future action by the International Labour Organization and its members, governments, employers, and workers' organizations regarding the promotion of decent work and quality learning in the education sector in the context of lifelong learning for all, skills, and decent work agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Akiyama. Now, please note that those wishing to take the floor should raise their virtual hand from the options in the toolbar so that the Secretariat may take note of a request for the floor. I will now request the social partners to take the floor and present their views on point for discussion 3. I will start with the employers group. Mr. Gutierrez, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning to all of you. Good evening, good afternoon, even good night. So I will present the recommendations from the side of the employers group now. First of all, recommendation to the ILO. One of the most pressing needs for the ILO is to conduct studies on the impact of COVID-19 on private schools. As the pandemic unfolds, it appears that there are still much uncertainties in terms of employment and how private institutions have been impacted, how many private schools have been closed, what kind of support they need, and so on. On the longer term, as we have seen during these last 2 days, the education sector needs to see much progress in order to achieve universal enrollment as set out in the SDGs. However, the employers group sees here a key role for the ILO in order to fill this gap. The ILO, in collaboration with other UN specialized agencies, could help frame a system for monitoring how national education systems are functioning. What are the pitfalls and areas of improvement so they are better able to make timely and evidence-based decisions? The OECD, for example, has done an excellent work with the various benchmarking studies in basic education, and we think the ILO should be engaging in similar work. For us, this is an absolute priority for the ILO to play a leading role in the skills agenda, and mainly in anticipating skills that companies and societies require to move forward in this rapidly changing world. As we have seen, private schools offer many advantages in both emerging and developed countries. Still, there is a lack of data about the extent and diverse nature of private schools, on how many persons are employed in private schools, and about working conditions. The ILO needs to fill this knowledge gap by generating additional research about the positive impact that private education brings not only to education system overall, but also in terms of employment and working conditions. Again, this data will then help improve and inform decision-making. There should also be a focus on teacher and trainer development as central elements for ensuring relevant and responsive workforce development. The ILO should also compile and disseminate good practices of overall countries that have revamped their entire education systems to fight inefficiencies and increase the overall quality. These examples are important to share so that other countries can benefit from these experiences. Now to the governments. The immediate priority for governments is to ensure their education systems are able to overcome the COVID-19 crisis. To do that, it is critical that governments offer financial support to private sector and private schools as much as they are supporting public education. This support is not only essential to cover fixed costs, but also to ensure private schools can survive the crisis and continue to educate and offer pupils the best opportunities for their future. Beyond the COVID-19 crisis, governments should strengthen their partnership with the private sector based on complementarity that benefits both parties while improving education access, quality, and relevance. Governments around the world should continue exploring various ways to involve the private sector in providing education, including vouchers, subsidies, capitation grants, stipends, and contracts. Governments also need to create an agile policy development environment, given the rapid pace of change. This includes regular policy review, monitoring and evaluation to measure impact and adaptation measures to respond to shifts and trends. It should also be the duty of government to maintain close contact between education systems, training institutions, and private sector employers in order to ensure that the students are equipped with the right skills and competencies that are in demand by employers, as well as the skills for entrepreneurship for those who may venture into self-employment. Although education and lifelong learning are major public concerns, we should leave no stone unturned to embrace private initiatives that provide solutions to this common challenge at all levels of the labor market. Whether is it about providing new online learning opportunities, real-time labor market information, digital certification of competencies, of vocational training for all ages, the market has ample innovative solutions available for policymakers that goes beyond the crisis. To mobilize the expertise, resources, and information of the private sector, governments should have the political will and the institutional wherewithal that incentivize the private sector through national and sectoral employers' organization to actively engage in consultative and decision-making entities involved in the governance and the education and skills development systems. Governments could and should take a leading role by investing in programs that provide skills training to underrepresented groups and underutilized workers. Social dialogue mechanisms has much to offer to foster this collaboration. It's also key that the building blocks for lifelong learning include a dimension on understanding of entrepreneurships, on the importance of the sustainability and productivity of enterprises, as this is key in job creation. This can be fostered by classes that put creativity at the core of their subject-based learning, and by including project-based learning and other transversal activities. This is a responsibility of governments shared by employers as well as students and workers. Lifelong learning is a joint effort. We have seen that universities in many countries don't train teachers for the 21st century skills. So we think that governments also have the responsibility to adapt and revise the teacher training curricula in universities in order to teach the right skills teachers will need for their profession. Finally, to the social partners. Social partners should collaborate to ensure that the private sector can play its role in the education system, based on complementarity that benefits all parties while improving education access, quality, and relevance. Social partners, together with the governments, can develop vocational education and training to respond to diverse needs of society, the economy, and individuals. Because investing in education and training leads to longer-term results, various stakeholders do not consider this as high priority at the national level. The participation of social partners in education reform is crucial, and the governments need to put skills development high on the national agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gutierrez, on behalf of the Employers Group. I now may invite Mr. Evers from the Workers Group. Mr. Evers, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the employers for their kickoff of this discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, it was clear from discussions yesterday that there is consensus developing around the importance of the 1966 recommendation. The need to recognize that quality public education is not a commodity. The importance of finding some balance around the opportunities and risks that tech offers to the education sector, and the need for workers' conditions that enable teachers and educators to do the crucial job they do in a decent manner. To this end, we would like to see the following commitment from the ILO, governments, and the social partners. That the ILO is mandated to develop a handbook for the implementation of the 1966 recommendation. That the ILO is mandated to run regional capacity building workshops to look at identifying and plugging the gaps between the time the recommendation was written and now. This will enable regional ILO offices to play a part, as they have with the implementation of the Harassment Convention, ILO C190, that our Argentinian delegate has found so useful. The ILO should promote just transition dialogues in relation to the role that curricula and school buildings can play to address climate change and other environmental issues. That the early childhood education guidelines are moved into the purview of CEART, so that countries can be held accountable for the implementation, and so that there is a place of recourse for ECE educators who are not given fair working conditions in line with the guidelines. They should be accompanied by regional workshops to implement the guidelines. There can be no quality education system without knowing that there is free, accessible public education available from the cradle to the grave, with a lifelong learning guarantee. We know that inequity in ECE leads to inequity throughout life and prevents students from being able to develop the complex problem-solving skills and creativity that we all know leads to a human-centered future. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered in the auspices of history here. As world leaders, first in 1919, and later here in the ILO at the end of the Second World War, declared firmly that labor is not a commodity. Let us not betray history. Digital systems, EdTech, as smart and useful as they are, will commoditize us through millions of data points if we do not govern them. We need to have stringent demands to these systems to safeguard and protect the integrity of educators and learners alike. There has been a strong consensus around the importance of EdTech, but also the need to regulate it. We therefore believe the ILO should be mandated to conduct research on the impact of EdTech on working conditions. This research would cover OSH issues, working time spent by teachers as a result of the impact of tech on education, the exploration of the feasibility of providing a digital basket for all teachers and students so that they can access technology at no personal cost, and the investigation of teachers' wages on regionally representative basis, and an analysis of the impact on teachers' income of the amount of money they have to spend to be technically connected and able to work. There should be further work done by the office on the right to freedom of association and collective bargaining that leads to social dialogue, enabling education unions to have a role in data governance, particularly around data privacy and surveillance, so that digital rights of educators and learners are respected. Also, that specific research be done by ILO on the right to disconnect, exploring regulation options and leading to a tripartite meeting that provides advice on the best instruments to use around regulating technology for the benefit of workers and decent work. Also, that the ILO start research on public procurement of technology, with a specific view to protecting public services so that they have the means to govern the educational sector for the benefit of all learners and educators alike, through as a minimum the joint data access and control in all procured tasks. Keeping the following in mind: the need for sound social dialogue with teacher representatives on the introduction of new digital technologies, building on ILO C94 and the OECD AI principles, and addressing the challenges related to digital trade use, also known as e-commerce rules, inside and on the fringes of the WTO, which can have a severe impact on countries' abilities to regulate digital services. The overall lack of consultation with teacher representatives on the introduction of new digital technologies and the ongoing assessment of these technologies is highly problematic. Not only does it disrespect the professionalism of educators, their autonomy and insights into the needs and wants of learners, it is also a breach of ILO Convention 94 and prevents the actualization of, for example, the OECD AI principles into workplace practices. We therefore must ask what the impact of this can or will be on the fundamental rights of educators and learners. What the impact of this will be on national authorities' rights and means to govern in the interest of their nation and people. Whether these rules will deepen digital divides. All parties have underlined the importance of face-to-face education, classrooms, and a balanced outlook on pedagogy, balancing direct instruction with other forms of pedagogy, linked to exploration, the wider community, and sometimes enabled by technology. All parties have also underlined the importance of a broad curriculum for a human-centered education and preparation for work. It is important that the ILO links this to the EI UNESCO Professional Standards Framework to ensure policy coherence and engagement from the teaching profession on all levels, from the classroom to the global level. The 1966 recommendation underlines this specifically in the following articles: on professional freedom, on professional standards, on cooperation on policy issues, and on participation of teachers and teachers organizations to improve the quality of the education service, educational research, and the development of implementation of new improved teaching methods. These lay the foundation for social dialogue on a broad range of educational and professional issues. To also initiate work towards supporting all citizens to have access to a lifelong learning guarantee. We have presented arguments around the need for all of the above and look forward to engaging with governments and employers to ensure the robust recommendations that emerge from this meeting and match the ambition of education systems, students, parents, and society. We will be open to working around TVET recommendations that ensure support and development of this crucial sector based on qualified teachers with sound working conditions, working in strong TVET institutions around a collaborative partnership with employers. We will not accept any language promoting PPPs, which have no place in the public sector, where every child's rights to education should be guaranteed by the state. However, we do understand that PPPs take many forms and where they do not drive inequalities, but augment state provision, such as in New Zealand, where Catholic schools belong to the Vatican, but deliver state education. This may be negotiated with workers in the respective countries. There are many things that could be in a PPP basket. Some could be subsidies to religious schools or partnerships related to TVET. Unfortunately, reality shows that it can also be a tool for increasing inequalities in some regions, where there is a vicious cycle of defunding the public education system, creating a market for education institutions, and creating a culture of privilege, where people go to underfunded public schools, also as a means to have some food, and those who can afford it would go to a private institution. We believe that well-funded public services are the best solutions for equity from the cradle to the end of lifelong learning paths. We also understand the issues highlighted so eloquently by governments and will work tirelessly to ensure developing countries have access to funding via the GPE that is not focused on transferring money from the state sector to the private sector, but works to ensure every child has access to a quality education. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Evers, on behalf of the Workers Group. And I now invite Ambassador Guadet, the Vice Chairperson for the Government Group. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Excellency. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. In our group discussion yesterday, 4.3, in terms of implementing various international instruments to ensure inclusive and equitable education and life learning for all, members of the group outlined various national mechanisms and educational development roadmaps implemented so far to empower people with knowledge and skills to contribute in their respective societies in creating a just and sustainable future. However, it was noted that the educational sector, particularly in developing countries, was already in a precarious situation. The supply-driven market and difficulties in accommodating the huge underqualified youth bulge joining the labor market remained a hefty challenge. The already existing challenge was compounded by the COVID pandemic and digital divide, which worsened the situation. Although the middle-level manpower remained important for many developing countries, there was a still recognizable gap. This was one of the reasons why many participants raised the importance of reskilling and upskilling projects and the need for the expertise of ILO, which is crucial in this area, not only to evaluate skills, but also identify what is needed and what needs to be reinforced. Therefore, when discussing recommendation on future action by the ILO, participants proposed first and foremost the need for periodic review of the important international instruments and national initiatives. As country circumstances do not remain the same, particularly following the COVID pandemic, participants maintained a periodic consultative process, tripartite, or a larger dialogue format was needed to identify and prioritize issues related to education and lifelong learning that needed to be addressed. In order to have a broader dialogue, the importance for ILO to bring on board various actors that know the education sector well, for instance, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Finance, and on top of the Ministry of Labor and social partners, was emphasized upon. This was said to be crucial to help with the skills development and take into account modern needs of industries, but also to deepen the conversation on the change of the curriculum to respond to the current and future labor market needs. At this juncture, engaging higher learning institutions to identify how skills are mainstreamed in decent work program was identified as critically important. Another crucial issue raised was the need to expand the discourse on migrant workers and ensure safe and effective mobility of the labor. Cooperation among regional as well as continental level to link the labor market, as well as the need to address quickly challenges of labor integration and mobility in many developing countries was emphasized upon. Because of their difficulties to consume their own labor, ILO expertise in this regard and sharing of best practices across the world was sought. To move forward and create some sort of perspective for a just and sustainable future, the need to invest in people, capacities was raised through human-centered approach. As such, to raise the awareness of the public, promoting lifelong learning through local, social, and prominent institutions was mentioned. In order to maintain resilience and best manage the situation, the need for trust and confidence in the education sector was emphasized upon. Mr. Chair, emphasis was put on the need for ILO to re-strategize its approach in terms of enhancing the capacity of its constituents in order to embrace new methodologies so as to strengthen skills development. In order to achieve all this, members of the group emphasized upon the importance and necessity of ILO's support in the areas of research, policy advice, and statistics, among others, so as in the end, focus is put on adult learners, future skills, as opposed to technical skills, and to help teachers stay on the industrial trends. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Guaide, speaking on behalf of the government group. I'd also now give the opportunity to any governments who may want to take the floor.
Oui.
Yes, please proceed. You have the floor.
Conakry, donnez la parole, s'il vous plaît.
Yes, Guinée-Conakry. Vous avez la parole.
Bonjour, monsieur. Merci de me passer la parole, monsieur le président. Je voudrais d'abord faire mienne toutes les déclarations ici données et préciser que c'est vrai par rapport au thème ou au point du jour, les systèmes éducatifs des pays sont très différents d'un pays à un autre. Vous allez trouver que la structuration, quelquefois, vous pouvez trouver que l'éducation de base et l'enseignement technique sont ensemble, d'autres, c'est différent, d'autres, l'enseignement technique est rapproché à l'enseignement supérieur. Tout cela fait que les organisations dans tous ces pays ne sont pas les mêmes. Et nous, en Guinée, par exemple, le système éducatif a 3 sous-secteurs. L'éducation de base, l'enseignement technique et l'enseignement supérieur. Mais la vraie préoccupation aujourd'hui, c'est quoi? C'est que le grand pourvoyeur d'employeurs ou de travailleurs est l'enseignement technique qui forme surtout des hommes de tâches, des hommes d'action, des hommes de développement. Malheureusement, il se trouve que ce sous-secteur est vraiment non seulement sous-équipé, sous-accompagné, ça fait que la maladie est venue aggraver ce système qui consiste d'abord à donner de la compétence à des jeunes gens qui doivent être soit opérationnels pour eux-mêmes ou alors pouvoir même employer des gens, malheureusement. Donc, nous pensons que pour vraiment accompagner nos pays, pour voir comment il faut redynamiser le travail et l'emploi, il serait intéressant d'abord qu'on donne de la bonne formation aux jeunes, qu'on les accompagne dans la formation, absolument en passant par l'enseignement technique et la formation professionnelle. Pour cela, nous proposons à l'OIT de faire une analyse et un diagnostic des cas, qu'on ne prenne pas de façon transversale tous les pays à la fois, mais plutôt qu'on se rende compte de quelle est la situation en fonction des pays. D'abord, comment est structurée l'éducation, ensuite, comment est-ce que l'éducation fonctionne, et après, voir dans cette catégorisation quels sont les différents appuis qui peuvent être donnés en fonction des cas. Ça, c'est un. Un autre élément, mettre un accent particulier sur l'appui à l'enseignement technique et à la formation professionnelle. Pour quelle raison? Aujourd'hui, dans notre pays, quand je prends un exemple, il y a des gens qui finissent l'université, mais qui ne gagnent pas de l'emploi. Ils sont obligés de revenir au niveau de l'enseignement technique, faire encore 2 ans ou même 3 ans, avoir de la compétence pratique pour être insérés. Alors, vous trouvez qu'à la fois, il y a les jeunes bacheliers, il y a les jeunes qui ont eu simplement le brevet, qui cherchent à aller à l'enseignement technique. Des universitaires encore qui reviennent à l'enseignement technique, ça devient un peu plus lourd. Si on n'accompagne pas de façon efficace, c'est très compliqué. Donc, à toutes ces difficultés, comme je l'ai dit tantôt, est venue s'ajouter vraiment la question de la COVID, qui fait que la formation ne peut pas se faire de la même manière. Des pays qui ont beaucoup plus de possibilités dans l'informatique, bien dans l'électronique, ont la chance de faire quelques formations en ligne, mais dans d'autres pays comme le nôtre, ce n'est pas tellement facile, comme je l'ai dit hier. Donc, encore une fois, je voulais vraiment inviter nous, du côté gouvernement et aussi l'OIT, à renforcer la capacité à la fois des travailleurs, mais aussi des formateurs qui sont dans les institutions d'enseignement technique et même de formation supérieure. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Michel, for your intervention. I now have on my list Mr. Poem, is it from Zimbabwe? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Allow me to join the government group chairperson in outlining the views of governments insofar as the future action of ILO is concerned. I think it is important for the ILO to go beyond the traditional partners in which ministries of labor represent governments, and the most national representative workers and employers organizations represent labor and business to engage, in the case of government, ministries of higher and tertiary education, which are responsible for curriculum reform and development, and also engage ministries of economic development and finance, which are responsible for mainstreaming skills development in the national development frameworks and also financing such programs. The ILO should also go beyond the national trade union centers to engage relevant trade unions in the education sector. I see in this meeting there is Mr. Sifiso Njov, the colleague from Zimbabwe, who is from the Zimbabwe Teachers Association. So these are the kind of trade union organizations, including professional bodies, which we want to take part in the issue of skills development, in part, working with the ILO. They are on the ground and they are involved in one way or the other in curriculum development. So they are very relevant. And in the case of business, I think the ILO should engage business organizations beyond the traditional employers organizations. There are some business organizations which are within the education sector and they are poised to play a critical role in the area of skills development and the curriculum reform. In addition, ILO should also engage telecommunications companies, and these are poised to contribute immensely to the much needed infrastructure development, and that can be done in partnership with the government. I'm glad that the government vice chairperson mentioned that in the case of developing countries, including Africa, we lack infrastructure in the rural areas. So if telecommunication companies can partner with the government, they can play a critical role in rolling out the internet to rural areas, which is critical to bring on board those in the education sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the representative of the government of Zimbabwe. I now give the floor to Burundi, followed by Morocco.
Merci beaucoup pour la parole. Pour emboîter le pas à mes collègues des autres nations, le droit au numérique dans l'enseignement est lié au droit à l'accès à l'emploi. Donc l'emploi est actuellement numérisé et la pédagogie est toujours moins numérique. Donc j'inviterai le gouvernement et l'OIT à se pencher à cette question. Il est important que alors le gouvernement mette en avant la technologie dans l'enseignement, notamment dans la formation continue au TIC pour les enseignants. Parce que l'accès au TIC dans certains États moins équipés devient un défi qu'il faut relever. Il y a notamment l'énergie qui n'est pas abordable partout. Il y a les infrastructures, comme mon collègue vient de le dire, qui sont impréalables. Et participer aussi les enseignants dans la politique dans la profession des enseignants, dans le dialogue social, il est important que les enseignants soient associés. Et au Burundi, il y a un programme du gouvernement qui a essayé de mettre un centre de recyclage, un centre d'enseignement de perfectionnement professionnel pour tous les jeunes qui sont au chômage, mais qui ont suivi l'enseignement fondamental. Cela va contribuer à valoriser les acquis des jeunes aux métiers qui sont les métiers actuels, notamment l'accès aux technologies et aussi l'accès à l'apprentissage continu pour les enseignants. Parce que le gouvernement burundais via le ministère de l'Éducation nationale, organise chaque année, en période de grandes vacances, une formation de renforcement des capacités au personnel enseignant. Cette formation, sous forme de cadre, donc, permet aux enseignants d'acquérir des compétences et de nouvelles techniques afin que l'enseignant soit toujours à jour dans son métier de formation. Et il rencontre, donc, comme plusieurs pays, le Burundi rencontre alors ce défi de formation professionnelle. Et c'est ainsi que le ministère de l'Enseignement supérieur et de la formation professionnelle a essayé de miser et de financer l'enseignement professionnel côte à côte avec l'enseignement fondamental. Et malheureusement, on trouve toujours des défis concernant l'équipement des centres professionnels, des centres d'enseignement professionnel, parce que nécessitent beaucoup de budget. Et des fois, l'enseignement professionnel devient un enseignement qui n'est pas de qualité. C'est juste ça que je voulais ajouter, parce que plusieurs points ont été vraiment bien discutés et bien énoncés. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much. I now then give the floor to the representative from the government of Morocco.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour tout le monde. J'aimerais brièvement revenir sur quelques points qui ont été élaborés par l'OIT et qui ont retenu mon attention. Compte tenu de notre expérience, nous pensons que le BIT est vivement sollicité pour effectivement diffuser des connaissances entre les différents partenaires afin de leur permettre d'en tirer l'essentiel qui correspond à leur réalité économique, sociale et technologique, ça d'une part. D'autre part, il est effectivement demandé au bureau d'études d'élaborer des directives dans le domaine de la formation, de l'enseignement, qui permettent d'avoir une vision sur les défis et les perspectives. Et ceci, bien sûr, comme j'ai souligné hier, c'est sur des référentiels et qui permettent d'avoir une normalisation. Un troisième point, c'est la coopération qui joue un rôle très important et dans laquelle, à mon sens, il faut garder à l'esprit le fait que les pays en développement ont besoin d'une coopération gagnant-gagnant qui permet de conserver leur indépendance aussi bien sociale que... Un autre point qui a retenu mon attention, c'est l'intervention de monsieur le représentant des travailleurs. Et je voudrais juste me demander à cet égard, qu'en est-il de la gouvernance du système? Parce qu'il a évoqué, surtout pour la formation professionnelle, le financement. Je pense que le financement à lui seul ne suffit pas, parce qu'il faut effectivement qu'il y ait un système de gouvernance et savoir comment ces budgets est dispensé. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much to the government of Morocco for its intervention. I don't see any other requests on the list, so therefore let me thank the governments for their interventions. Now I will take, therefore, a second round of interventions from the groups, so that they may make a brief set of comments to the statements that we would have heard in the discussions in the first round. So I will then go, yes, emphasis on brief. I therefore give Mr. Evers the opportunity to give a final response on behalf of the workers.
Mr. Chairman, we would like to ask for a 5-minute recess. We need to reflect on some of the things that we've heard, if that's fine with you.
I'll invite the Secretary General to give an intervention relative to your request.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chairperson. the office is now in an extremely difficult position where we, within an hour, have to turn around not only the debates and convert them into conclusions and recommendations on today's discussion, but also have them translated in the 3 languages. So we were actually hoping that we could wrap this session up since you have all provided elaborate elements. And let me remind you that this is just the start of the negotiation process. There will be a working party tomorrow, and also you will have the chance to discuss the conclusions again on Friday. But we are really, really very much pressed for time at this stage. This is it's a miracle if it works by 2 o'clock, by the way, but please bear with us. I would like to encourage you to perhaps reflect on the comments made in the working party and on Friday. Thank you.
Okay, so in light of what we've just heard, Mr. Evers, are you so inclined to proceed?
Yes, of course, Mr. Chairman. And I know what work pressure is like, and of course we take that into consideration. So a couple of points, maybe. We heard language on engaging with businesses, engaging with the business sector, and we'd like to reiterate that partnerships should be tripartite partnerships and discussions, and we've already pointed to a lot of successful ones. And in that sense, I can also, I think, regarding the question on governance, engaging with the people who do the actual work on the ground in the classroom, you'll get a really important, and I would say crucial point of view on building your education systems and engaging with governance, and usually also moving towards a system of trust, high trust instead of low trust. And accountability can be done in many forms. Monitoring can be done in many forms. And I think you will find that the essence of the teaching profession, which is based on trust, on relationship, deep knowledge, are actually also the foundations, I think, for how an education system should be built and governed. And that's why the engagement of teachers, education personnel, and their organizations is so crucial. I'd also like to, as a response to some of the things we heard from the employers, reference the CR 2018 report, where it says that education is a fundamental right and not a community, and education should be a public, equitable, and accessible for all, and to ensure that education remains a public good and a fundamental human rights. And that regulation and monitoring of the private sector is also a big part of that. So we would like to involve that into our discussions as well. And I'd like to keep my comments to that.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Evers, on behalf of the workers. I now invite Mr. Gutierrez to give his final set of remarks on behalf of the employers.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, the chair. Yeah, a couple of remarks about language as well. So regarding this recommendation 1966, and as my colleague from the workers side has just said, there is a committee responsible for that implementation, for revising that I think it's not up to us to mandate them what they have to do. So, and I think there's a lot of room open for implementation of that regulations. PPPs, governments have asked, and they have shown even yesterday, some of the workers representatives from several countries gave good examples of public-private partnership in their countries, Norway and others. So I think that that's crucial also to recognize the thing. And when you are talking about the working conditions and so, we have to find a balance also, because there is also bad conditions in the public sector, not only in the private sector, as I reminded yesterday about the case in my country. And of course, we are not talking about replacing teachers and at any moment. We do agree that education is a public good. We said that yesterday, but public good does not mean public provision only, and in many other fields. And finally, we should take into account that in the ILO, there is no recognition of a right to disconnect. I know that there are other institutions that, and even countries that have enforced law regarding the right to disconnect, but in the language of ILO, there is no recognition of the right to disconnect. Of course, we have to find a balance between working and personal life. For sure, for all of us, that's crucial. So I think that so far that's all from our side, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gutierrez, on behalf of the employers. I now invite Ambassador Guade to give her final comments on behalf of the government group. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Excellency. I do not have additional comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Then, ladies and gentlemen, we would have therefore now concluded our discussion on point 3. We would have heard quite a number.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, I'd like to bring in one more comment, if I may, on something I just heard.
Very briefly.
Yeah, very briefly. I would like to emphasize that the recommendation is a joint declaration, so that it is everything is that is on the table.
Okay, so noted. Thank you very much. All right, as I was saying, ladies and gentlemen, we would have come to the end of the discussion on point 3, and I really want to thank all of you for your interventions, your discussions and thoughts on these issues. And I must say that we will have to stop here with regards to discussions in plenary for today, okay? Now, at this point, I will invite the coordinator to give you some updates and announcements.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would like to remind the participants that tomorrow the Working Party on conclusions is a closed session. So those that would try to join, only those that have been nominated by the groups will be able to join. So I apologize in advance if we do not let you in, but that has been decided by the groups. May I kindly request that you review the draft conclusions and recommendations for future action as prepared by the office on the basis of your plenary deliberations during your respective group meetings this afternoon. We will send the document to you in the 3 languages by 2:30 before your group meeting. In order to facilitate the review of the draft document in your group meeting tomorrow morning alongside the comments of other groups, we kindly request to you that you submit your proposed amendments to the text in draft and track to the Secretariat by 6 today. We would like to emphasize again, please make those changes in track so we can take note of it, and the deadline for submission is by 6 today. Secretariat will overnight consolidate the positions of the 3 groups and present a revised version with proposed amendments in comment boxes for your review in your group's meetings and subsequently at the Working Party. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretariat, for the update. Before I close, allow me to update you also in my own capacity. Tomorrow, I have another previous commitment, and sitting in for me will be the deputy in our mission, Dr. Ricardo Kelman from the Mission of Barbados, and then I will resume my duties on Friday. So once again, tomorrow, filling in for me and chairing the Working Party session will be Dr. Ricardo Kelman. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, our session for today is now closed, and the Working Party conclusions will meet at 14:30 tomorrow afternoon. That's 14:30 Geneva time. The meeting is now closed.